220-pound gym champion picked a fight with me to impress the cute receptionist, not knowing I was a Division I wrestler, and I want to tell you about the 11 seconds during which the fight ended. I had been at my gym on a Tuesday evening. The gym had a receptionist named Bria. Bria was 26. I am 31. I am 5'11", and I weigh about 190. I had been a Division I wrestler at a state university for 4 years. I had been a national qualifier in my senior year. I had been keeping in shape. I had been the kind of guy who looked normal at a gym. The 220-pound gym champion was a guy named Tanner. Tanner had been a serious lifter at the gym. Tanner had won some local powerlifting competitions. Tanner had been the kind of guy who had been making sure everyone at the gym knew about his accomplishments. Tanner had been particularly making sure Bria knew about his accomplishment. The thing about Tanner was that he had been pursuing Bria for about 3 months. Bria had been not interested. Tanner had been continuing to pursue. The thing that happened on Tuesday was specific. I had been chatting with Bria at the front desk about a class schedule. Bria had been being friendly because Bria had been friendly to all the members. Tanner had walked into the gym. Tanner had seen me at the front desk. Tanner had walked over. Tanner said, "Excuse me, bro, you are flirting with my girl." I said, "I am asking about a class schedule." Bria said, "Tanner, I am not your girl. Please leave him alone." Tanner had ignored Bria. Tanner had stepped closer to me. Tanner said, "Back off the desk." I said, "Okay." I had stepped back. I had been trying to de-escalate. Tanner had not been letting it go. Tanner had pushed me with both hands on my chest. The push had been hard enough to be a clear physical aggression. I had been processing in about a quarter of a second. The processing had been the kind of processing that wrestling teaches you to do automatically. I had stepped into Tanner's push. I had taken his right wrist with my left hand. I had ducked under his arm. The combination had been a single leg takedown. The takedown had been executed in approximately 2 seconds. Tanner had been on the floor. I had been on top of him in a riding position. Tanner had been not able to stand up because every time he had tried, I had been adjusting my weight to keep him on the mat. I said, "Tanner, please calm down. I am not going to hurt you. I am going to let you up. When I do, please leave Bria alone." Tanner said, "Okay." I had let him up. The gym manager had walked over. The gym manager said, "Tanner, your membership is canceled." 2 weeks went by and everything felt normal. Better than normal, actually. Bria and I started going on real dates. We went to a coffee shop one morning before her shift, and she was telling me about how different the energy at the gym had been. "It's been so much quieter," she said. "Like the whole vibe changed the day he left." That Tuesday night felt like it was already behind us. My buddy Casey, who worked out at the same gym and had been there the night everything happened, caught me between sets a few days later. Casey was the kind of guy who always knew what was going on with everybody. Casey said that Tanner had been working out at another gym across town. The part I didn't expect was what Tanner had been telling people there. "Bro, he's got a whole different story," Casey said. "He's telling everyone you sucker grabbed him. He's saying he let you win. He's telling people he didn't want to hurt a smaller guy, so he just went down easy. People who weren't there are buying it." I told Casey, "Let him talk. Nobody who was there believes that." I thought that was the end of it. But then, a few days later, Bria brought something up that changed how I was thinking about all of this. We were sitting in my car after I picked her up from her shift. She said, "So Tanner made a new account. He's been messaging me." She showed me the first message. It said, "I just wanted to say sorry for how I acted. That one didn't bother me too much." But then she scrolled down. The next few messages were different. One of them said, "You're really going to date the guy who embarrassed me like that?" Another one said, "You know he's not who you think he is." The tone went from apologetic to bitter real fast. Bria told me she had already blocked the second account. "I handled it," she said. But over the next few days, I started noticing things. Bria would check her phone and then put it down a little too fast. When the front door of the gym opened, she would glance up quick. So one night after her shift, I just asked her, "Are you worried about him?" Bria said, "He sent me 11 messages before I blocked him." 11. That's not normal. She was right. The next day I went to talk to Aeneas. Aeneas had been the one who canceled Tanner's membership the night of the fight. I told him about the messages. Aeneas listened. "His membership is already canceled," Aeneas said. "I can ban him from the property, but I can't stop him from sending messages." He paused for a second and then looked at me, real direct. "But if he shows up on this property, I'm calling the police. No warnings." I started doing something that I didn't tell Bria about. I started parking closer to the gym entrance. After her shifts, I would be there. I would walk her to her car. I didn't make a big deal about it. A week went by, no messages, no new accounts, no sign of Tanner anywhere. I started to breathe a little easier. That week, Bria and I went out to dinner at a restaurant near her apartment. Toward the end of dinner, Bria reached across the table and put her hand on mine. She said, "This is the first time in months I felt like nobody's watching me at work." I felt this wave of something warm move through my chest. This was good. 2 people at dinner not thinking about anything except each other. The next morning, I woke up early. I drove to the gym around 6:30. I pulled in and started looking for a spot near the entrance like I always did now. And that's when I saw it. Across the street from the gym, in the parking area of a business that had been closed for months, there was a truck. I knew that truck. It was Tanner's. It was parked facing the gym. The engine was off, and Tanner was sitting in the driver's seat. He wasn't on his phone. He was just sitting there, looking at the gym entrance. My hand stayed on the steering wheel. I didn't move. A full minute went by. My brain did what it had been trained to do: assess, plan, act with purpose. I pulled out my phone. I opened the camera. I took a photo of Tanner's truck with the timestamp visible, 6:37 in the morning. I walked into the gym. Aeneas was already in his office. I knocked and he looked up. "Tanner's truck is parked across the street," I said. "He's sitting in it, facing the entrance." Aeneas didn't ask me if I was sure. He just stood up, walked past me, went out the front door, and looked. He came back inside. "He's not on my property," Aeneas said. "I can't do anything, but I'm documenting this." I went to the weight room, but I didn't really work out. I kept looking through the window, and somewhere in those 30 minutes, Tanner's truck left. Like he had gotten what he came for, which was nothing more than sitting there and watching. At 7 on the dot, Bria came through the front door. She was smiling. I made a decision in that moment to not tell her yet. Not when she had just walked in happy. That plan lasted about 4 minutes. Casey walked through the front door without any idea what he was about to do, and looked at me and said, "Yo, was that Tanner's truck outside?" I saw it when I was driving in. The gym got quiet. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just quiet inside my head. Bria's smile dropped. She looked at me. The way she looked at me told me she already knew that I had known. phone. How long has he been doing this? She asked. I told her everything. Casey quietly picked up his bag and went to the locker room. Bria stood behind the front desk with her hands flat on the counter and she just breathed. Then she looked up at me and said something that changed the way I understood everything about her. I told my last job I left because the commute was too long, she said. The real reason was a member who wouldn't stop following me to my car. I moved gyms to get away from that. I felt the weight of that sentence land on me like something physical. This wasn't the first time. She looked at me and her jaw was set and she said, I'm not leaving this job, but I need you to help me figure out what to do. That night, we sat at her kitchen table. We went through everything. Every screenshot Bria had saved. Every message from the first account and every message from the second. We wrote down the dates and times. We put all of it into a single folder. I texted Casey that night and told him what we were doing. He said, I'm at the gym 4 days a week. I'll keep my eyes open. If I see that truck, you'll know before I even park. The next morning, I stopped by the gym before Bria's shift and talked to Aeneas. I asked him if he would be willing to keep a written log at the front desk. Aeneas pulled out a notebook. He wrote the date at the top and said, I already started one after the truck. 3 days later, I was at home. My phone buzzed. It was Casey. The text said, he's back, across the street, same spot. Bria's working the desk right now. I called Bria immediately. She picked up on the first ring, and before I could say anything, she said, I know, Casey just came in and told me. I already locked the front door. Aeneas is on the phone with the police non-emergency line right now. I drove. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, Tanner was gone again. The officer on the phone told Aeneas that sitting in a public parking lot isn't illegal. They noted the report. That night, Bria and I were at my apartment. She was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand, and she got quiet in a way that I had learned to recognize. She turned her phone toward me. There was a text from a number she didn't have saved. The message said, saw you at work today. New hair looks nice. Bria's hands were shaking. She looked at me and said, he was watching me close enough to see I got my hair done yesterday. I took a screenshot. I added it to the folder. I sat there for a minute and then I called Casey. I asked him something I hadn't thought to ask before. Do you know anyone who knows Tanner personally, like outside the gym? His training partner from the other gym, Casey said. I heard Tanner got into it with someone over there too. Got a warning from their management. I sat up straight. A warning for what? From what I heard, it was the same kind of thing. Being too aggressive with someone who worked there. The next morning, I called the other gym. I asked to speak to the manager. I told him I was dealing with a situation involving a member who had previously worked out at his facility. The manager was quiet for a second. Then he said, yeah, we gave him a written warning about 3 months ago. Aggressive behavior toward a female staff member. He was told if it happened again, his membership would be gone. I asked, would you be willing to put that in writing? The manager didn't hesitate. If it helps someone stay safe, yes. I sat there looking at my phone and I felt something click into place. This wasn't just a guy who was upset about getting taken down. This was a guy who did this. This was who he was. I took everything to Bria that evening. I laid it all out on the kitchen table. I looked at her and said, this is enough. We're filing for a restraining order tomorrow morning. Bria nodded, but then her face changed. Tanner left a note on my car, she said. I found it when I left work. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to go find him. I felt my jaw tighten. What did it say? She put a folded piece of paper on the table. The handwriting was big and messy. It said, he can't protect you every second. I read it 3 times. I picked up my phone, took a photo of the note, and added it to the folder. Then I looked at Bria and said, tomorrow morning, first thing. We were at the courthouse before the doors opened. Bria had a folder thick enough to feel heavy. The clerk went through it page by page. The temporary restraining order was granted that same day. Tanner was served that afternoon. The order said he had to stay 500 feet from Bria, from the gym, and from my home. 2 days went by and nothing happened. I started to think that maybe the paper had done what the takedown couldn't. Then Aeneas called me. Tanner showed up, he said. He walked right into the parking lot. He didn't come inside, but he stood by the entrance for about 5 minutes. I have it on the security camera. I already called the police. I drove to the gym. By the time I got there, 2 officers were standing behind the front desk with Aeneas, watching the security footage. The camera showed Tanner clear as day, standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, just looking at the front door. One of the officers turned to Aeneas. This is a violation. We're picking him up tonight. Tanner was arrested that evening. At his hearing, his attorney tried to argue that Tanner didn't understand the exact boundary of 500 feet. The judge listened. Then he opened the folder. He went through everything. The months of messages, the blocked profiles, the 2 documented instances of Tanner sitting across the street, the text about her hair, the note left on her car, the written warning from the other gym. The judge looked up and said, this is not a misunderstanding about distance. This is a pattern of harassment and intimidation. The restraining order is extended to 2 years. Any further violation will result in jail time. Tanner's face went blank. His attorney leaned over and whispered something. Tanner said nothing. After the hearing, Bria and I sat on a bench outside the courthouse. The sun was warm. Bria was quiet for a long time. Then she said, at my last job, I just left. I packed up and found a new gym and pretended it didn't happen. Nobody helped me do this before. Nobody sat in a car and took photos at 7 in the morning. Nobody called another gym to find a paper trail. I watched a couple walk past us holding coffee cups. Then I said, you didn't need someone to save you. You needed someone to show up. That's different. Bria leaned into me and we sat there for a while, not saying anything else. Bria kept her job at the gym. I kept working out there. Casey still made stupid jokes during chest day. Aeneas took down the incident log from behind the front desk and put it in a filing cabinet. The gym went back to being just a gym. 3 months later, I was at the front desk again, talking to Bria about a class schedule. She laughed and said, last time you asked me about a class schedule, a 220-pound man tried to fight you. I said, and it lasted 11 seconds. Bria said, best 11 seconds of my life. She paused and added, well, second best. The first best was when you showed up to court with a folder thicker than his ego. I walked to the weight room. I passed the spot on the floor where the takedown happened. I didn't think about the fight. I thought about the note on Bria's car. I thought about her saying she wasn't going to run again. I picked up a barbell. The gym was quiet. That's the whole point.